Call to order the meeting. Welcome, everyone. It's Tuesday, January 22nd. It's a second meeting, Finance and Warrant Commission, to look at the articles for May town meeting. We are granting permission to Westwood Media Center. Does anyone else want to record the meeting? No? Okay. With that, we'll move to the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we have a couple of members that will be joining us shortly, and since we have Howard Messing remotely via phone, we'll do a roll call. So we have myself, Tom Kilgariff.
Here.
Cindy Buckley.
Here.
Barb Delisle.
Here.
Jim Farrell's not here yet. Lauren Fitzpatrick.
Here.
George Hertz.
Here.
Alan Larkins-Rowan.
Here.
Peter Lentz.
Here.
Diane McCarthy.
Here.
Howard Messing.
Present.
Thank you. Mike O'Hara.
Here.
Jennifer Perkins. Not yet. Chris Pareda.
Here.
And Mike Powers.
Here.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So we'll have three areas that we're looking at tonight, starting with the town planner and our planning board articles. Then we'll have Dottie Powers, town clerk, and we'll end with the Board of Selectmen articles. So with that, Abby and Dave, did you want to come forward with your articles that are not numbered, but I think we all know. In this packaging?
Yes, right
Yeah.
there.
The town hall.
You've all got the package. And it's by order
Right.
of presentation.
Great. And are there pre-done questions? Does everyone
Yes,
have those?
everybody has a copy of the
Okay.
questions.
Great. Thanks for sending those ahead of time.
Thank you. So the first, we'll go in the order that you have them in your spreadsheet. The first three articles, these are the three articles that were approved by town meeting in November 2017, but ultimately in the spring, summer, we learned that it was disapproved because of a procedural error by the Attorney General. So the first one, this was a change to the table of accessory uses in our highway business district to allow employee-focused accessory uses such as cafeterias, snack bars, vending machines, minor retail sales within commercial buildings. The change was to allow it in the highway business. Previously, it had only been allowed in our industrial zoning districts, but a little over a year ago, a property owner at the end of Wilson Way was getting ready to market his building and approached the planning board about allowing a cafeteria internal to the building for employees. So the planning board is bringing that article back again.
Any questions? You want to hold them for me? Okay, we could do that. Oh, yeah, thanks, Jane. Yep, sorry, I'm off topic. Go ahead, sorry. Medical uses.
The second article, this revises some of the existing definitions in our zoning bylaw for a couple medical uses and adds new definitions where we realized we don't have a definition. So we don't have a definition for hospital or a treatment facility. So for facilities that allow overnight stays. So the zoning article adds language for a definition and then includes where they should go in the table of uses. There are previously uses that may have been mentioned in the bylaw but didn't give any direction on where they are not allowed. And so I don't know if you have any questions that you want me to address now for that article. I think you had.
There were a couple that came forward as part of the ones we sent ahead. I just wonder if you want to comment on them.
For the two new uses, the treatment facility and the hospital, the planning board proposes them in the ARO zoning district. That's the Administrative Research Office zone. That's the area, 2 areas in town, right off the highway, off of the East Street Bridge area, and where Meditech and Fox Hill Village are. We propose those uses in those locations because we think they're most consistent with those types of uses and have a limited impact on surrounding properties. It's a small commercial zoning district close to the highways. They're also built-up locations. They're pretty much fully developed, so there's no open areas where these new facilities are likely to come in. The zoning does also require by special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So if we got an application with the zoning change, it would require a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Right now in our zoning, we don't have a definition for a hospital, so if someone proposed an application for a hospital, we really don't have anything in our zoning telling them where they cannot go, so they could make a case of where they could go.
Great.
And then the third article that was just approved was a general housekeeping article that was correcting errors and updating the formatting and numbers of sections. The fourth article, which is the first new article that the planning board is sponsoring, this is increasing the height for a fence from 6 feet to 7 feet. Right now, the zoning allows for fences that are 6 feet and under to be allowed without having to get any special, any permits from any of the boards or committees or building permit. Over 6 feet and up to 8 feet currently is a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. The planning board is proposing increasing that allowable height to 7 feet. That would allow someone to build up to 7 feet without a permit. Over 7 feet will be still a special permit with the Zoning Board of Appeals. And the main reason for that is the planning board, or commercial properties or many properties will often have 6-foot high fences. We commonly have the Conservation Commission, when there's some habitat or resource areas, ask for there to be about 6 inches off the ground to allow wildlife and creatures to crawl underneath the fence. And then we've run into having applicants having to go the extra step to go to the zoning board for a special permit. So we'd like to increase that to give a little more room for people to build 7-foot fences without having to make a trip to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And then the next article, currently our zoning bylaw in our table of accessory uses, it reads that if you have a garage or storage and parking area of more than 3 vehicles, that requires a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Staff brought this to the attention of the planning board, and the planning board they're still in the early stages, but are taking a look at exploring this language to make it more clear, to give the building commissioner clear instructions on how to enforce this section of the bylaw. Because right now, the way it reads, if someone has 4 registered vehicles in the driveway, a special permit is required. So the building commissioner has at times had calls from neighbors looking for him to enforce this part of the bylaw. We think the zoning was written many years ago when 2 cars were probably more common at households. So the planning board is looking to revise that section and see what's the appropriate number of vehicles on a residential property and at what point should they go to the special permit level.
Yeah, I think it was, there's confusion because of storage versus garage, and so it kind of opens the door to people saying, well, you've got 4 cars in your yard, that's a storage area, and we want to tighten up the language to make it, I think, more clear that it's what we were ruling about is like a garage, like a 3-car
Mm-hmm.
garage versus a 4-car garage, not just because there's a lot of space there. It could be an opportunity to call the building inspector and say, hey, they've got too much space.
And then the next planning board article, this is an amendment to section 8.4, which is residential retirement community section of the zoning bylaw. This allows for retirement communities by special permit in Westwood. We only have one in town, Fox Hill Village. And we'd like to amend that section to add a new section requiring affordable units when there's 8 or more proposed to be at least, to provide at least 15% of the total units to be affordable. This is consistent with the language we have in the rest of our zoning bylaw. We had made this change, I think, in 2016. At that time, we didn't include this section of the bylaw because Fox Hill Village was already constructed. But since then, we'd like to add that back in just in case if there's any future development. I think Clark House closed at Fox Hill Village, so the planning board, you know, while we don't have any plans now, we'd like to make sure this is in there in case there were plans that were going to come forward in the future, either there or anywhere else in town. And then we have a general housekeeping article. That's in case we discover any other zoning errors while we're reviewing the zoning. And then lastly, we have a placeholder on for endorsement of the open space and recreation plan. The planning board has an open public hearing. They're reviewing a draft of the open space and recreation plan currently and continue the hearing to next week, January 29th. There was an open space and recreation planning committee that got together over the last year and brought forward a plan that went to the planning board in December. So that has general goals town-wide related to open space and recreation throughout the town. So the next step in the process is for the planning board to approve the plan. So they haven't done that yet, but they are working on that. So we put the placeholder on in case they have that ready to forward on to town meeting and to you in advance of town meeting.
So is that one you don't have a lot of information really at this point?
We don't have a final draft yet, but we have a draft that the planning board's looking at right now.
Okay.
There were general goals in the plan that were focused on open space and recreation. Once the town does ultimately have an open space plan, that makes the town eligible to apply to various state grants. So that's one of the reasons the town's been looking to update this plan. The current open space plan is from 2000.
So at our last planning board meeting, we went over the goals, and we got a lot of good feedback from people, and we're looking to see at the next meeting we'll continue that public hearing and discussion. I don't know if you want to go through any of that to what the top goals were, or
Sure. We had I think what we saw from the 2000 plan, there was a big focus on open space, acquiring land, and preserving open space. We saw a lot of that with this new plan that was been updated in 2018, but we also saw a lot more focus on recreation and recreation opportunities. We had some major recreation goals were to develop an indoor recreation community center, an ice skating rink, also expand and explore more outdoor recreation facilities and fields. And then related to open space, a lot of the goals focused on promoting the open spaces that we have, promoting and providing more information, trails, maps, maintenance of our open space and trail areas. So working more and managing and maintaining what we do have and trying to give more visibility to those areas.
Can I just ask the procedure? You guys will approve it when it's finalized. You'll approve it, then it goes to the selectmen, and you want them to approve it prior to town meeting, or?
I think they were, the Board of Select, or the Select Board, were looking at it tonight to provide a letter. The planning board asked the Select Board to provide a letter of support. So I think that was on their agenda tonight, or earlier tonight, so they'll be hopefully doing that. So we've also reached out to the Conservation Commission and Recreation Commission, so we'll be expecting those soon. But on the open space plan committee that we had over the last year, we had representatives from various boards and commissions. I think we had at least one member from Recreation Commission and a member from the Select Board and a member from Conservation Commission.
And have you incorporated the land trust in that as well?
Yes, we had a member of the Land Trust was on the Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee that met last year.
Okay.
May I ask
Okay.
a question about fence height? Can we go back to that?
Can we just answer these questions that were sent ahead, and we'll go back to that, Cindy, yeah. So there were a couple of questions that were sent ahead of time on the endorsement.
Okay. We did the survey for the open space plan. There was a question about, was the committee satisfied with the survey responses? The planning board hasn't talked about that too much, but the committee that met a year ago, we had a total of 809 responses, and that's been the best that we've had in town, that we know of, at least in the recent past.
Well, I think they also, Nora gave a presentation at our meeting, and there was an initial survey, and then I think we specifically wanted to get more input from young people and went to the high school and told them that the survey was out there, and that resulted in like 100 and some more responses.
We were around 650 responses when the survey first went out. It was at the end of 2017, and we found, one of the questions asked your age, so we found that we didn't have a lot of responses from young people, so we did send it to the schools, and then we got about 150 more responses after that.
I have just a question related to the survey.
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
That actually makes me want to ask. With the 809, I noticed you said responses rather than respondents. Did you impose any kind of controls on the survey to prevent someone from taking it multiple times, or?
No, I think it was just open.
I'm curious, because I know, when we've looked at other surveys, like the Islington Center survey and some other ones, there was some question over the validity of the results because there were no controls. So I'm just curious if we, same question is, why would we discount some results but move forward with these for a plan that's going to cost quite a bit of money and kind of drive the direction of the town for many years without validating that that wasn't one person filling it out 10 times?
I mean, generally, our surveys are open. At that time, the committee, when they put their survey out, didn't impose any controls on that. I mean, we had the survey, and that was done before the vision session, so the first public input that the committee got was from the survey. That was at the end of 2017, early 2018. Then there was a vision session on February 1st last year. And then we had some public meetings to review the draft goals and objectives that was in the springtime. And then the committee met in November to forward and voted to forward the plan onto the planning board. So it wasn't just from the survey, it was the survey, the vision session, and the comments that we received at the committee's meetings.
Thanks.
Just so I understand the survey in its context, what were the questions on the survey? Was it more trying to get input? There wasn't anybody saying yay or nay, right?
Right. There were multiple choice questions. They were related how people, what resources they use in town, what facilities, what fields, what courts or activities they use, or what trails or open space areas. So we focused on both open space and recreation specifically. Asked them how satisfied they were in certain areas in the maintenance of certain facilities. We had some open-ended questions, but they're mostly multiple choice questions.
So do you feel that of the respondents, it sounds like you have some demographic information. Do you feel that the 809 respondents reflect the demographics of the town overall? Or were they skewed to certain populations by virtue of the topic? If not, we can look at it later. It'd just
Yeah,
be
I think
interesting.
When
to
we
see.
do have the open space plan, we do have the full survey in there and the results of the survey, and we have the full survey in a summary, and then we have it in the appendix.
Because it was only electronic, as I recall, and emailed.
We did have some paper copies
Okay.
Available in town.
20 paper responses.
Right, 20 paper responses, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So mostly it was electronic responses.
And I think, and it's sort of interesting because I'm not, the planning board didn't do this part of it,
Right.
but, I mean, the process is to get input, is to continue to get input, and so a lot of times people ask about surveys, and, you know, the survey is not a vote that is representative of the community necessarily. You could have 800 responses, and they might say, we want this, but then we come to a board here, and you say, well, this, you forgot about something, or planning board looks at it and says, you know, we really need to think about this also, and so I do believe that the process of consensus, it's not, it's more of an inclusive thing. It's like the survey, they're trying to gather as much information as they can to make sure we don't leave anything out. But then we need to review it as a community, and ultimately it's town meeting, you know, that's going to say yay or nay on something like this. And at any point, someone could come in and say, I think you forgot about this issue, or I don't really think that is the most important issue. And I think that that's an ongoing adjustment that needs to happen.
So Dave, was the idea of the survey then to sort of get initial brainstorm ideas, initial direction maybe of some folks in town, and then take that and develop some plans or potential action plans, and then sort of recirculate those plans to the public for input?
Yes, I mean.
Loaded question, sorry.
We didn't, I mean, the committee had worked on the draft plan throughout. It was really came to a full plan probably in the fall. They did initially review the survey results at the February vision session. And then the committee got together and kind of had some work sessions on trying to pull that information into goals and strategies to reach those goals. That was in the spring, and then it took a few more months to kind of put everything down on paper in the on the plan. So the planning board is taking input now and has asked for any further input that they'll be reviewing at their continued public hearing, preferably. If anyone from this committee has any more comments, the planning board is reviewing it next week. But let's see, I forgot where I was going with all those questions.
Well, I
think the question was, is there to redistribute the survey
yes.
after you gather from all of the findings that you collect?
We weren't redoing the survey, no, we weren't doing
they
it at this point.
articulated
right.
goals, so that would tell me,
Yeah.
you said
The
you have
survey
3
was at the
goals.
beginning of the process. So
Right.
right now, the goals, you know, we've kind of taken all that we've learned and put them into goals that are under review right now by the planning board.
I think that's why we want to hear,
Do you want feedback on the goals?
I think, feedback on,
Yeah,
yes.
so we'll have to get you the plan.
Now,
We'll
is that
look-
the 6
I
goals
think
here
that's a
that
good
were
place to
online?
start.
The re- the-
Yes, we have a draft online, I think, let's see what it is.
Yeah. Is this it?
If you-
Recreation goal number 6, 1 through 6?
Yes, yeah. Sorry, we don't have the full document yet, because I know it's still.
It's in here, right?
Oh, is it in there?
Is it in
No,
here?
not the full open space.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can resend that tomorrow.
Well, the document online is, I think it's 100 pages long, right?
I think it's like 200 pages long or so.
Oh.
I don't think
But yeah,
it
was it that long?
Set it up
Oh,
seven.
okay.
Sound like
All right,
that.
without the appendix. So yeah, it is about 100 pages, but that includes data analysis of our facilities, but there are goals.
And the survey summary was in the appendix, but I didn't see the appendix online. Is that available online?
Not yet, I don't think.
So, I'm sorry, so maybe you could summarize,
Right.
what's next steps then for the open space and recreation?
The next
Plan,
step is for
strategy.
the planning board to continue their review and complete their review of the open space plan. Then it will be ready to come to town meeting and go through this process.
And it would be looking at the whole plan, not,
Right.
so do you want to restate the goals, just so people hear them again, of what the goals of the plan are to accomplish? Because if we are not, or if we have questions tonight about those goals, I would think you'd want to know that sooner than later, or no?
We should probably go through the general. I mean,
Okay.
We had some feedback immediately on some of these goals, and also, it's,
Yeah.
again, I'm saying, like, the planning board's reviewing this, we didn't write the plan, but.
Yeah, that's fine. It would just be helpful, I think, to hear the goals now and not
Okay.
Yeah.
in March.
All right, the first, so first the plan was organized into general goals. We had 2 general goals. The first one was pursue adoption of the Community Preservation Act. Number 2 was protect and enhance Westwood's community character. Then we had 3 open space goals. The first one is improve management and condition of conservation areas. 2 is increase awareness about Westwood's existing open space and conservation areas to encourage use and protection. The third is identify and protect, acquire lands appropriate for open space and conservation that are contiguous to existing protected land, provide connectivity, have high natural resources and habitat value, or are in areas of town with limited open areas. And then there are 6 recreation goals.
Can you go slow on these ones? Sorry.
Sorry, we didn't distribute it because we're still working on
Yeah.
the draft for next week, a revised draft. So we're hoping to have a revised draft for January, updated in January. Goal 1 is expand opportunities for extended use of existing recreation fields and facilities to meet demonstrated need. 2 is to develop a new indoor recreation community center to better serve the community's needs for recreation programming. 3 is identify properties which might be available to serve unmet recreational needs. 4 is develop new outdoor recreation facilities and programs. 5 is develop new ice skating opportunities. And 6 is to continue to provide quality recreational programming for all Westwood residents.
I have a question, it's maybe more for Julie than you guys. If we were to vote on, if FinCom was to vote on this, your first stated goal is about the CPA.
Right.
So, I mean, I know it's not a warrant article, so we're not voting that it's on it, but if you know, that's susceptible to having this whole thing fall apart and not get approved if people don't support a CPA now or ever. I'm just, you know,
That's fair.
I think that's a very loaded goal.
Well,
I agree. Go
I
ahead,
made
Cindy.
the second point that you made is sort of along those same lines. It's sort of, that's very arbitrary, it's not arbitrary, I don't know the word I'm trying to look for, but it's vague. It's vague, and what one person's idea of preserving the town's character is completely different from somebody else's version of protecting the town's character, and just opens it up for a lot of debate and interpretation. And it
brings
seems
up-
vague for a goal.
Brings up the
Right.
issue
Well-
about diversity and various other things that
Right, well,
have
the
been used in the
plan,
past.
the plan is organized into goals, and underneath the goals, there's more strategies that are the objectives that go with them. The planning board did spend a lot of time at the last meeting on January 8th talking about that, the first goal about the Community Preservation Act, so they're still deciding on how they want to include that in.
I think there was a lot of consensus on the planning board that I would rather spend more time talking about the actual open space and recreation goals, specifics of those things versus this item in front, which is a how do you pay for it item, because there are other ways that things could be paid for, and I think that it does load the, it does put a lot on this, because we ended up spending 45 minutes talking about the CPA instead of talking about how to improve the management of the conservation areas or what sorts of recreation goals there should be. So I think that all the board members were very concerned about the prominence of that as a general goal, and I think I don't speak for anybody,
But normally when you put forward goals, you don't propose up front how you're gonna pay for something. They're goals, and how you pay for it is kind of a strategy afterwards. That's not really a goal, that's your, maybe you get private funding or various things like that, or gifts or whatever. But to put that up front, it's like anything else, like, okay, you have the ice rink, or you say something vague about ice skating. So I see that as an ice rink. So, maybe you get property donated and you get somebody sponsoring it, and you don't say up front, we're gonna tax everybody for an ice rink. So maybe it shouldn't be your goal as to how you're gonna fund things. Your stated purpose earlier was that by having this in place and approved by the state, it opens us up to potential grants. So that's providing you an arm of funding, but I wouldn't want to say up front how you're going to fund it.
So that is one of the items the planning board is continuing their discussion on, because they had that same question at their hearing on January 8th. So they're still working on those goals and objectives, and looking for input from other committees.
So why don't we get that document offline back from you, Jane, and we can look at it, and if it merits having a conversation, we can squeeze it into our February meeting, but it'll probably be March that we'll look at it again.
What's your timeline, like when it's going to be kind of ready to go?
Whenever it's, the planning board had put this on as a placeholder, hoping that they would at least bring something forward once the planning board adopts it, at least in advance of your public hearings, which I think start at the beginning of March. So the planning board has at least 3 meetings before March.
All right, so if we're meeting on we're talking about this next on the 29th, right? What would be the next? It's going to come to this group for a similar discussion, I assume, right? Would that be in March?
Well, your public hearings start in March 4th or so, so we would generally like to have everything to you in advance of that if it was going to go forward.
So I think our goal would be to try to incorporate this feedback and avoid having the same sort of obvious issues come up again.
Yeah, so if we get the information, Jane can collect any questions from us. We've been trying to do that to help facilitate conversations.
Julie, can I
Yeah,
just
go
follow
ahead,
up
Jim.
I'm not clear on why you're seeking this board's endorsement. These are a lot of broad topics, and typically we focus on specific issues. We don't endorse the capital plan or other townwide projects.
Well, it would be presented as a warrant article, so for the town meeting to adopt this plan would have to go in as a warrant article.
So you want the town meeting to approve the whole plan in a specific order? So would the projects be funded and requested in a specific order? Would it be an all or nothing, or can you?
Well, generally, so the committee that we created in the planning board has to approve the open space and recreation plan. The state process that is followed also is required to receive town meeting endorsement. They call it endorsement rather than an approval, it also then has to go to the State Department of Conservation and Recreation for approval. It's similar to how we do master plan and comprehensive plan has to be approved by, so these larger townwide plans. They're not specifically regulatory, they're a guide for policy making, require planning board approval and town meeting endorsement.
But why would you want to do all of these things at once as opposed to, I mean, trying to get town meeting to agree on one issue, never mind 18 issues?
Well, I think could I,
Yeah.
like, so let's say that, so it's just adopting a statement of like, this is what the town would like to see. And so on that, let's say that on that list is develop new ice skating opportunities. That passes at the town meeting. It doesn't cause any money to be spent towards that, but town staff would start looking for ways to make that happen. And I think that's kind of the theme of all of these. It's prioritization. It's saying we want to do these things, so town staff should focus on that as opposed to other things. You know, if it was saying we don't want ice skating opportunities, so don't spend time trying to figure out how to fund it or anything like that.
So at town meeting, are they going to line item vote? Or is
No.
it all or nothing?
No,
It's
No.
all or nothing.
Well, it's approval of the overall plan. The plan is a guiding policy document, really. It's
But-
not,
I think what Jim is saying is, like, say you want to expand the use of the fields into other kinds of activities, but you don't want a skating rink. How do you vote on that article?
well, that's what the planning board is doing now. They don't want to bring a plan forward that they don't think is going to receive overall
Is
endorsement.
town
But
meeting approval going to make us eligible for grant programs? Is that the deal?
yes.
Okay, so that-
It also
that-
needs state
that sort of answers the
approval.
question. We need to get town meeting approval in order to be eligible to get some of the state grants that are out there for maybe ice skating or.
Right.
But it's also directing town staff to go in certain areas that maybe people agree with one thing that's on there, but not others. So you're pursuing grant money for stuff that people maybe don't want. I don't know how you have that, I mean, I can't see how you could vote, even just as a resident. How would I vote on that, on these things?
And I think similar to the school building project, I think the communication outward would be key so that people don't walk in that night or the week before and feel like it's loaded, and they have to understand every single item in there and what it really means.
Okay.
Abby, just to be clear, you said voting on this would not approve it, it would endorse moving forward. Is that what you said, just to be clear?
Town meetings approval is essentially called an endorsement of the plan.
Okay,
The
same
planning
thing.
board has to approve it.
Planning board
The
has to
planning
approve
board
it.
has to-
Town meeting would
Endorse
endorse
it.
it.
Chris, did you? Okay, then,
Okay.
go ahead, Chris, then Mike.
I was going to go back to the fences, but when you're.
No, I
Yeah.
had another one this one.
Yeah, let's finish this and we'll go back.
Hung up a little bit on process, but I think, it seems like, you guys had a committee formed in 2017 to study this.
Yep.
You took surveys and you had meetings at the planning board.
Um,
So the town has already had a lot of input on these various things. We might have said pickleball and basketball, but
Yeah.
hockey is where you came out. So it strikes me that what you're asking for from us in the town is to endorse the process, not necessarily the substance of you. In other words, we have to make sure you guys ran a full town process, collected input, thought through it, considered alternatives. And I'm asking the question, if we believe you guys did all that appropriately, procedurally, then we sort of endorse the process and the town then approves the process. But we have to effectively defer to your guys' process that you've been running for the last 18 months or however long. Is that a fair way of thinking about it?
Yes, that's right. The steering committee, it's Open Space and Recreation Plan Steering Committee, they started in the fall or late 2017. It started with this process. Had the survey, the vision session. They had, I think, a 21 or 22 member committee from various representatives in town from different committees and boards and commissions. We had the vision session and came together, and we worked with a consultant to formulate this plan that is now before the planning board and then will come through this process and then to the town meeting process.
But I think.
I'm stuck on the fact that she says resources were gonna be expended to follow some of these things and find funding for it, though.
But I think to Mike's point, it would be helpful to have that laid out, the process that you've
Specific
gone
steps.
through. And kind of to the earlier questions that Ellen and I had, who were the respondents, just kind of the due diligence done to it. I get your point too, Jen, but maybe one of the follow-up items you could share offline, or at least with us in March, gets to the process. Is that fair, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Barb's point's also a valid one,
Yeah.
because to Jen's point, it's, are you setting goals, or are you setting funding mandates? If you're setting goals, selectmen have financial goals that they try to adhere to. They're not mandates, and they're not, they're things that they check themselves on. That's sort of what you're talking about doing as well. But to Barb and Jen's point, I think it is gonna be awkward if you come in and have 12 goals that you're trying to, and one of them is to seek a specific financing, which is a version of a tax, a surcharge, effectively.
If I could be so bold to suggest that your general goals ought not to be the ones that you've articulated, but rather more process-oriented to address some of these questions.
Because I look at what Jen's comment about expending town resources to look at something, and I wouldn't want to be sitting here 2 years from now and you come forward with, well, the town endorsed it, so we've been doing this, putting all our work and effort, so, it's really taken us 2 years to come up with this, so of course you have to vote for it. And it kind of comes back to bite you after that. I mean, more, or more like what Chris was saying about process goals or broader goals.
Okay. Anything else on the open space? And we'll go back to the other questions for the articles. The fence, Chris, did you want to ask that?
Just one question on the fences.
What did I put?
As I understand it, there's another zoning bylaw that talks about fences constructed at street corners to make sure that they're set back enough that they don't restrict vehicle visibility. I don't see any change to that incorporated in this, and I suggest that you should take a look at that, because if somebody's constructing a fence that's 7 feet high instead of 6 feet high, you might want to increase the setback required so that it doesn't interfere with vehicle visibility.
Right, we did do that about 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, I think. Maybe that was May 2017. We did revise that language to include a
There's like a triangle.
site
drawing.
distance triangle.
That's what I'm getting at, but if
so
the base of fence is 7 feet instead of 6 feet, you need to push that setback further.
What we said.
I
I
think
think
that
our
it's-
language was written it couldn't be over 3 feet. So I think it would still be captured. I think without anything over 3 feet, couldn't be within this 30 feet. But we can just take a look at that and
Right.
double check.
It's the 30 feet that I'm worried about.
Yeah, I think the goal is if you raise this amount, then that may cast a shadow essentially over the previous.
Or it may obstruct, if we get a higher slope, so you may need to push that back out to 35 feet.
So we want to make sure that what was done with the previous zoning is not undone in any way by this.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so we'll double check that language.
And I just out of curiosity, what was the procedural error that caused the AG to reject these things?
Oh, so when the planning board was here at a public hearing, at the end of the night, not all planning board members were still here, and we didn't make, the planning board has to vote to a specific date, time, and place to continue the hearing, and they did not do that. So when we come back in March, we'll have to make sure if the planning board should vote to continue the hearings to a specific date and time. It was when we were here, it got to be later in the night, and the planning board didn't
Right,
make the
so-
actual
So we would
announcement.
open the hearing on the articles. We're not open now, so we don't have to continue
Yeah.
tonight.
But in March, we should do.
But we would have
Okay.
our hearing, and then we would continue it to the FinCom hearing.
Okay.
And then we just have to make sure that at that meeting, we announce that we continue it to our next planning board meeting. So what happened, that didn't happen. It was the Attorney General said there's a procedural defect, and we can, we'll post this. We have to make everyone aware that there was a defect, and if no one objects, then it won't matter, and we'll let this go, but someone wrote a letter and objected to it, and so we have to come back and repeat the process.
Thank you.
Any other questions on any of the planning board articles? And I think we checked all of the pre-questions were answered. Oh, was that one changed? Recreation?
Last question, Abby. Recreation is asking for 3.1
Million?
Yeah, for space they need for programs. Is this in addition to the money that?
When we revote those 3 articles, in the write-up, can we state what the vote was at the last town meeting when they got approved? I mean, you know, so that it was, you know, the substance of it, it wasn't a substance issue?
Yep. I don't know what that question means, to be honest.
Okay, I wasn't sure what that was either.
Yeah. Oh, was it Pete? Yeah. Peter,
Yes.
the 3.1 million space for rec, was that part of a budget question that was sent ahead of time?
I didn't.
Oh, okay, I'm not sure what.
Yeah.
That was me. Oh, go ahead,
Oh.
Ellen. I think, yeah, that's probably more of a budget question.
Okay,
than a
we'll hold that.
question. Hold it for budget.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, now Dottie to go through a lot last. Perfect. Did we have?
Well, Dottie comes out, everybody has a sheet here that she provided for
Oh,
us
yeah,
earlier,
perfect.
just
Okay.
for your reference.
Hello.
Hello.
The article that I am sponsoring is just to amend some language in the general bylaws. And what it is going to do is just add electronic to the already 2 other ways that the moderator could ask voters to vote. There was a couple of questions. One of them was the electronic voting. What is the intention of the option to use electronic voting versus just moving to electronic voting? This gives a moderator discretion to call the vote using electronic voting during the meeting where, as everybody remembers at the last town meeting, we were able to use electronic voting, but we had to have town meeting vote before we could do it. So this way here, we can plan ahead of time, and the moderator will be all set to use it at his discretion. Will there be costs associated with the change? Yes, there will be costs associated, and the benefit for doing this, the electronic voting, is, as you all saw the last town meeting, we obtain a more accurate vote and may even encourage more people to attend town meeting and know their votes are accurate, fair, quick, and private, and they're voting without fear or intimidation. Will this change or replace a standing vote with e-voting or allow it as another option for the moderator? Again, everything is at the moderator's discretion. You know, he could still ask for a standing vote, he could do a written vote or electronic vote, but at least he has a discretion to do that, make that decision. And the other question was, is there an appropriation of funds for the equipment? There's, we always have funds appropriated in the town meeting budget. And right now, you know, we're still at kind of a preliminary stage, and we were very fortunate because at the last town meeting, we had 1,500 devices that were available to us, and it was at no cost. It was a pilot. So, you know, moving forward, we'll have to look into that to see, you know, do we purchase or do we rent? We have to see what the best option for the town is in terms of money and investment. You know, I don't know if we want to invest totally, just because if the software changes, you know, so we may be better off renting, but, you know, we will be looking at that, and we'll come up with the best alternative to that. Does anybody have any other questions on that?
Go ahead, Jim.
Has this been, I'm sure you have, worked it in with the rest of the town meeting rules? For example, if you were to call the vote, you have to be on the prevailing side. So where would the checks and balances be if you had an electronic vote?
Well, when everybody comes in, you all receive a device, and it's unique to everybody.
Right, so everyone votes.
Yep.
Someone calls the vote. Can they link that person calling the vote to establish that he or she voted on the prevailing side?
No, no, this is all unanimous.
So, right, so if
So
somebody
you're-
were to call the vote, how would you establish that they were truly on the prevailing
Well,
side.
when everybody comes in, they're given a device, which everybody that was here saw that. And you vote yes or no, and it's electronically, we receive it, and we receive the yes and the no votes.
Right, but my question is, if you were to call the vote, okay,
Mhm.
moderator's gonna say, ask, did you vote on the prevailing side? They can say yes, no, we have no way of checks and balancing, it's just total good faith.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any different with a standing vote. It's the same
Well,
thing. or
standing, you can
even-
see somebody
you-
standing.
You can, but, or even a written vote, there could be a written vote.
But we're adding this one, so we didn't have the written vote, right?
No, we have a written vote in there. We're just adding electronic, just as another means. And, you know, the reason why we're putting it through again is because at the beginning of town meeting, we did ask people if they were interested, and it was unanimous that people, you know, were interested, and we got a lot of very positive feedback at the end that people really wanted to.
I think it worked
To
great,
see
I
it.
mean, it was a lot faster than going to the
Yep.
vote, there's no question about it.
Yep.
Just wanna make sure it runs fluid.
And, you know, that's the thing, you know, we want everything to be transparent, and, you know, town meeting is very important. You know, we want everybody's votes to count the way they should. So everything, you know, all the checks and balances will be made for sure.
And all the keypads will be accounted for, there
Mhm.
won't be any freestanding ones.
Nope, absolutely. There's, at the town meeting last year, we had 1,500 we could use. We ended up having 1,200 people, 12, that checked in, and you couldn't, when you checked in as a voter, you received one. And if you left, you had to bring your device back. And somebody was with those at all times, so there was no way anybody could have walked off with any.
But they
So-
couldn't have walked in, grabbed a,
No,
walked back out, grabbed
Nope.
a second one?
nope, nope. It was very secure.
Okay.
Dottie, along the lines of what Jim was asking, are there systems out there that, that are, as they're being handed out, sort of, identified as to who
There
the
are,
resident was that
and
took
there is a
that?
town right now, Wayland, that has them, and they use a different company, but they're scanned into a voter. So we didn't do that, and I don't, you know, it's something that we'd have to explore, but, you know, we still want their unanimous votes, so we don't want to tie any vote to one person.
Right, right.
But, you know, there are companies out there that, yeah, and there are some towns.
It's still an anonymous vote, but there's a log of who's who.
Yes, yes. But it's the same thing when you check in, we check you in with a poll pad, so we know we've checked you in and we've given you a device. So there's that checks and balances right there. And nobody that's not a voter receives one of those. We run a tight ship. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Great, thanks, Dottie.
Okay, thank you.
Taking along, Jamie. And now on to Board of Selectmen. Good evening. Bad news. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you.
Start yours. All right. They're perfect. Like the iPad.
Sure, come on up, Charlie. So we have our specialist here who can answer some of your
That's great.
questions when we get to the other ones. So we have a total of what I count so far as 19 articles, but we still have 3 reserved in case something comes up last minute. And I'll try to go through and answer as many questions as you have, but try to keep it brief because this is just a preview of coming attractions.
Right.
So on our articles that we have, I don't know if they're numbered or not, they'll just go.
No, they're not
Okay.
numbered.
So I'm just gonna go through them. They're not necessarily numbered yet. At this point in time, we don't know what's staying and what's going, so I'll try to just do that. We have an article for accounting for PEG access cable funding. If anyone who knows, the Mass Municipal Act that went through last year was to allow the towns to take the money from the cable companies and then figure out how your town is gonna handle that money. We are still working through it, and for anyone who's paying attention, the FCC has talked about getting rid of it for our small towns, and it's become a major issue, but the FCC has not taken any action yet. So we don't know how this is going to play out. We expected some word in February. Obviously, we're not there yet, so we'll just keep you posted. But there is the potential the FCC could take all of that money away. But they're working on it at both the state and federal level, as Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey both stated on Saturday. We have an article for street acceptance. At this point in time, we do not have any streets, but we always keep that in case something comes up last minute. We also have an article for the discontinuance of public ways or surplus layouts. So far, we do have one hedgerow lane, which may be on the warrant to abandon part of that because it's being reconstructed for a new development in that area. And we expect that article to continue to go forward. We have our standard articles. We have a road improvement under Chapter 90 funds, which is not the other article that you're expecting to come up. But this is just the Chapter 90 funds, comes up every year and every budget, basically to accept state money to fix our roads. And we also have the Department of Public Works is requesting a $4.9 million to put towards repaving of sections of High Street, pavement preservation, sidewalk enhancements, crosswalk safety improvements throughout the town. And part of that will be on 109, where the sewer is supposed to redo the sewer pipes and water, and they're going to leave the road in disarray, and this is an opportunity to go in and fix the sidewalks at the same time as the 109 is repaved. So Todd is here to answer questions on that. We do have some questions, of course, that we received from you ahead of time. Probably the number one being why right now. And I guess the answer is we expect, and at least in my meeting with the school committee, that we're still a little bit away on the new school building. My guess, honestly, and I won't speak for the school committee, late 2020, maybe as late as 2021, before we come to the town to ask for money for a new school. In the meantime, it's been almost 10 years, I think, since we did our last road bond, and there's an opportunity now to fix it now, and get this straightened out before we have to go for a new school. Really, in a nutshell, we can kick the can down the road as long as you want. It's like no different than your car. You need an oil change now, maybe you wait a little bit longer. Pretty soon, if you don't take care of it, your engine breaks down, and now you're in a lot worse position. Same thing with the roads. And I don't know, I can say this, and I always joke about it, but based on the nice cars we have in this town, I think it's kind of important to keep the roads in good repair all the way through. But I'll let Todd talk a bit more about that, any questions you might have.
Go ahead.
So, and maybe we are supposed to know this, and I apologize if we are, but where along High Street are you talking about the water main being fixed? Right out front here?
No, actually, the Dedham Water District is doing some water main replacement along High Street, approximately from where Pond Street meets 109, going up towards Pheasant Hill and ending in that general vicinity. They're also doing water main replacement along Pond Street, from Clappertree Street up to Pond Plain Road. So there's two different segments, one of which is on 109, the other is along Pond Street. But as I had mentioned in the Select Board meeting prior to this meeting, the state of 109 right now, as we forecasted, we started 5 years ago forecasting this, that we needed supplementation to deal with where we are now. That, along with the Dedham Water District doing their work, we just feel that it's the optimal time to take advantage of this. So we pieced that together as part of this townwide project.
Also, if you just hold that thought for just 1 second, Mr. Powers. There's 202 crosswalks which are being addressed as a result of this as well. As you all as you know. I mean, we have a difficulty with sidewalks and getting them up to code. It's one of the parts of this bond is to take care of all of our crosswalks in town.
Is that 202, Mike?
Yes, 202.
Crosswalk locations.
Yes, Mr. Powell, sorry.
Thank you very much, sir. So Todd, does your plan include resurfacing or doing work to 109 beyond where the Dedham Westwood?
It does, yep.
Okay.
It does.
Because it's pretty clear to me if you drive out front here, there's severe dippage in 109, so it's gonna correct that?
Yeah,
that
there's
part of it?
significant rutting that's already taken place, obviously, at all the traffic signals with the weight of the vehicles that use 109 frequent and daily. We have some rutting developing along with just the classic deterioration of pavement as you head westbound along 109. So going into this bond and this townwide project, the first segment is a $2 million ask out of the 4.9 to specifically address all the deficiencies along 109. Of which include sidewalk deficiencies as well. So we're looking at upgrading and updating all the sidewalks, pretty much like we did with the new sidewalk that we installed through the Complete Streets program. We want to bring everything up to a consistent, not only aesthetic feature, but from an ADA compliance standpoint. So that would be embedded in the $2 million out of that $4.9 million ask. As Selectman Walsh mentioned, we have $500,000 of this money is going to be appropriated to the crosswalk analysis that we've recently performed, which is only in draft form. But what it did is it analyzed all 202 crosswalk locations in town, came up with some recommendations, whether it be signage, signalization of pedestrian signalization, not traffic signalization, or advanced striping that could be incorporated at every single location. And the cost estimate to do all the improvements at all 202, which I was actually surprised that we had 202. I figured we had 50 crosswalks in town. The cost estimate, though, to address everything is $500,000. Also, a portion of the 4.9 is approximately $1.5 million going towards sidewalk enhancements throughout town. We have a lot of deficiencies with some of our sidewalk infrastructure, one of which is part of this program is the Hartford Street sidewalk that runs approximately from Route 109 all the way down towards Wessex Drive. There's a significant portion of that sidewalk that has absolutely no curbing reveal whatsoever, and there's really no clear-cut distinction between where the actual edge of pavement is and to where the sidewalk is. And that's a major thoroughfare for a large neighborhood and abutting neighborhoods that children access, and they're walking day in and day out, not only to the middle school, but to the high school as well. And then the last portion of the $4.9 million ask is just simple pavement preservation techniques. As I had mentioned to the select board in the previous meeting, we ran a little bit short with our Chapter 90 this year. We weren't able to take advantage of some of the techniques that we've most recently used and utilized. Examples like microsurfacing that we did on Pond Street, which has proven to be a great technique, all the way down to your simple pavement preservation measures such as crack sealing. So it's a very well thought out program. Again, we look at this as a town-wide project that's going to benefit the entire community, and start to finish our projection and timeline and goal would be approximately 2 years that you would see a significant facelift, not only to the 109 corridor, but to a significant amount of our sidewalk infrastructure along with all 202 crosswalk locations.
Todd, will you have a plan or a visual that we could see as this goes forward, or something you could share offline?
And I apologize for not having that tonight. I didn't expect
okay.
to, but we do. We're actually working on one now, and I'll definitely give it to Jane prior to the meeting, and you guys will all have it.
So would this be a 10-year bond?
Yes.
And the last road bond we had, we voted how long ago? Do you happen to know? I'm sorry putting you on the spot.
15 years ago.
And that's
5 years ago when we proposed.
And that's done. We've paid that off and it's
Yes.
gone back. Okay.
Yes.
We have a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, John.
Oh, Todd, the famous cut through town of Hartford Street to High Rock Street to Dover Road to Conan out to Summer Street, those roads are really deteriorating. And I know it's all this massive amount of cut through traffic. On the one hand, it keeps the traffic slower, so I understand it, but on the other hand, it seems to me those roads are really taking a beating.
They are.
Having traffic. Is that on the list? Or?
It is on the list. It's actually on the list. I want to say it's on year 3 of this program. So this program, that last portion of the $900,000 the pavement preservation is also divvying up and using to supplement our Chapter 90 deficiency, which would allow us to address that particular area.
That's 3 years away?
Yeah, I believe it's 3 years away. I'd have to go back. It's actually right on my board. I have all, like, the next 3 or 4 years mapped out.
Wait 3 years?
It can, it can. And part of the reason we're waiting is because we had just, not just, I believe the traffic calming measures went in about 5 years ago. And to go in there and mill and overlay that particular neighborhood would have been counterintuitive as far as trying to, so we've done some pavement preservation measures there, which essentially is held together, especially the Conant area. But we're about 2.5, 3 years out on that as it is.
Todd, is the town having to pick up any of the road or sidewalk work associated with the new East Street Railroad Bridge, or is that all part of the MBTA project?
That's all part of the MBTA project, but what I'd like to do is take a look at the gap that we'll have between the limits of the bridge work heading up to Smith Drive. We do have nice granite curbing there now, but what I'd like to do, if we have some extra funding available, is to just replace the HMA hot mixed asphalt that's existing there now with concrete, just to pair that up with what we've done down on Smith Drive, because that came out nice.
So is there any connection back to public safety, and is the chief of police thinking about how, once this is designed and done, that there's kind of reinforcement for, because it is a cut through, and if we are making this more walkable or accessible for kids, at some level, I think there needs to be public safety support.
Sure.
Because stripes on a road are only as good as, you know, the reinforcement behind it.
The police department is very much in the loop with this proposed plan, along with a lot of the studies that we've undertaken so far to get us to this point. Paul Sicard does a fantastic job with the Pedestrian Bicycle Committee. So they're very much in sync with what we do, and obviously everything that we do is from an infrastructural standpoint. There has to be a level of enforcement, and they're well aware of that. So.
Good. Go ahead, Peter.
I feel like I have to ask the question about, is there a way to push this out over more than a 2-year period? You know, we've had, in recent years, we've given back X amount of dollars, $500K back, not including it in the tax rate. We have meals tax that we've been collecting. So there's different funds like that. I understand certainly it would be better to do it in a, say, 2-year period, but have you looked at trying to get other funds that the town has as opposed to going out for a bond?
I won't speak on behalf of the funding mechanisms, because Pam does a great job with that. As far as outside opportunities that we've had, we've exhausted a ton of programs through the state, whether it's Complete Streets or Safe Routes to School, that we're actually getting somewhat of a take it easy type of vibe from the state right now. But with respect to how Pam funds these, I'm the construction guy. I stay away from the bank.
The only reason I ask, I just think it'll be a question from the town. If we decide again this year to say, oh, by the way, we gave $500 back to the taxpayers. Well, why'd you give that back, but you're asking for a bond type of thing? And I know the dollars don't necessarily add up. But I think it would be a question that people would ask, and I think we should be prepared to answer that.
So I think when we give money back and we put it towards the taxes, I think the benefit is really so low that people don't really understand how much, the impact of it. And I think, so we asked the numbers, so how much does this impact every family? $80 a year is what it's gonna cost on average, right? So if we figure that out, repairs to most motor vehicles, even just one tire is more than $80. So start to, really think about this in terms of practicality, and I don't think too many people want to, have that risk that they happen to be the one where the road fails and, lose a front end or a tire. I know, especially based on some of the expensive cars that you'll see in town, just one tire, could pay for 5 families, so.
Yeah, and just so you understand, if I'm asking a question, I don't mean I'm advocating that as an approach.
I understand, believe me, I understand.
I just feel like we have to represent the town, and that is a question that will be asked.
Yes, and we get asked often as well, so. I appreciate that, thank you.
A message that I definitely want to convey, though, is that this is, I keep saying this, but this is most certainly a town-wide project. I think obviously it incorporates a lot that we need to address public works from an infrastructural standpoint, but it also shows and depicts that we've been listening over the past several years to even the most recent concerns about pedestrian safety, whether we're addressing it within all the existing infrastructure of the crosswalks or our deficiencies with some of our sidewalks. So it's a town-wide project that's going to benefit the entire community. So.
So that being said, is there a way to break this apart at all? Or is it really you're all in? For this to work right, you need the sidewalks, the crosswalks.
We really do, because when we're addressing, just take 109, that portion, for example, the district is going to go in, they're going to begin this work this upcoming construction season. We're going to have the ability to piggyback some of their work with our sidewalk improvements, rather than say, okay, well, let's just wait. They'll do their work. We have to allow for a settlement to occur within their trenches that they're going to be repaving. So we let that occur, and then all of a sudden, we're going in there ripping all of 109 apart, doing the sidewalks, doing the paving, where we can, again, piggyback their trench work with our sidewalk rehabilitation, have that done and buttoned up going into next winter. Then right out of the gate in the spring, we come in and do our paving, and in my eyes, an example like that is less disruptive, and we're going to be able to do the same approach along Pond Street when they do their work from Clabber Tree to Pond Plain. So now you're talking a good chunk of this money already being in the works, and then when, yeah, I suppose you could sit back on the crosswalks, but in the scheme of everything, and again, Pam is the expert with this, but in the scheme of interest rates and however this thing gets funded, does it make sense to leave out 500,000 when you can just incorporate it in the one ask and throw it all together?
And it won't be as easy for her to just go out and get a $500,000 bond. I mean, you know, might as well get it all into one larger amount. They won't be spending it all. It'll be sitting there, so we'll get interest on it for, you know, we won't really be paying interest on the whole bond, because we'll get interest on the money sitting there for a period of time too, so. It's like a line of credit almost.
No, I was just trying to understand from the project if there was a way to break it apart and not go. Again, questions that I think people in the town will ask.
Especially if there's pieces of it that are obvious, like there's $500,000 being given back and there's $500,000 going out for sidewalk improvement, then those, I think it becomes a little bit more of a question when we start doing that.
Those are kind of independent decisions. You know, one of them is a decision that the select board makes about tax relief and all. So ultimately, it is a final decision. But, you know, we've got to look at the merits of this in and of itself. And I think that it's better for us to be looking at the whole package rather than say, well, I don't like I don't go walking anywhere, so I don't care about the crosswalks, or I don't want sidewalks there. It's kind of like the overall package of, do we want to do this or not? And then, you know.
I guess I see it as a question of funding, though, specifically, which is if there's funding in the budget to do something and we're asking to go out for bond, I think that question is going to come up. So, and again, I reiterate, this does not mean that I feel this way about this particular ask, but if there is a way to piece this apart and pay for it in a different way, I think we should just be prepared to be able to answer that question. Like, I completely understand the Westwood district, a water district, and the coordination there, that seems obvious. But if there's other pieces of it that aren't tied to something else, we just need to be prepared to answer why we're not funding that in another way.
I think part of it is, right now, we're still guaranteed that the bond rates are low, but we don't know how long that's gonna last. And so, you know, you could, let's say you split it up, 2.5 and, 2.4. We could get one at 4 and then have to spend 7 or 8 on the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's easier to lock it in, and, the prediction is that the rates will continue to go up, so it's all being considered when we do these things, so.
Yep.
I think another way of looking at it too is that when you put it all together and you fund it, that all those projects are going to get done. If you piecemeal it over years or in such a way, they're not necessarily, priorities will change, commitments will change each year. Now, if we're giving $500,000 back in tax relief on the one hand, and the bond is costing us $500,000 on the other in any given fiscal year, the debt service impact on the residents is actually zero.
because we're giving them back what we're going to be paying out in debt service. But we may not do the tax relief every year, and so that's why we average it out. So when I first came here, the roads in this town were absolutely deplorable. People knew us for the condition of our roads. And this is a method that was recommended by a blue ribbon panel that the Board of Selectmen engaged to come up with a solution for how we're going to restore our roads to a passable condition. And their suggestion at the time was do maintenance, and every so often do a road improvement bond and spend the money and do some major projects in town, but elevate as many roads as you can at one time. And so we've done 3 or 4 of them. This will be the 4th or 5th that we've done in that period of time. And it's worked. It's worked tremendously.
Julie? I had a
Go ahead.
quick question. Related, it's a sidewalk question, but I'm thinking in terms of asks coming out the next few years, what's your current thought about when you would potentially come forward with a monetary ask for a potential Gay Street sidewalk to actually fund the project?
To be honest with you, we're still exploring outside funding opportunities, and I've yet to hear back from the state, so without getting guidance or direction or a yea or nay from them, I don't really feel comfortable saying where we would stand with that. I would expect that the state, just a guesstimate on that, 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
I still feel like the state has started to offer so many opportunities, and they're seeing deficiencies in Chapter 90. They're seeing that we're short. Easton short this, and communities are short, so they're offering opportunities. So for us as a community to jump the gun on what could potentially be a $3.5 million project. But in the meantime, the state is still taking a peek at it, and they'll give us a little bit of direction and guidance.
So it sounds like it's not imminent.
I wouldn't say it's next year, put it that way. I think, especially with what's evolving now, I would say,
That's why I'm asking, because
Right around the
thinking like questions residents might ask, here's almost 5 million and then another 4, and then we've got potentially up to 60 million for schools coming. I'm just thinking ahead to like asks that might be
Right.
coming down the line. So it sounds like this isn't necessarily.
no, and as aggressive as I like to be with things like this, the Gay Street sidewalk is a very sensitive topic. We want to make sure we dot our i's, cross our t's, and now with the potential of the school being constructed, who's to say that there might not be an opportunity to supplement some money or put some money towards a stretch of sidewalk that is going to be a direct abutter to a brand-new school potentially. So that's another reason why I'm trying to downshift the gear, but it's...
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. We have a charter amendment for a change from the Board of Selectmen to Select Board. I don't think I need to tell you that it's going to be non-gender. It'll be a select member. Will now just be called the Select Board or Select Member, and the chairman will no longer be called the chairman, it will be the chair. And it's a gender neutral. I think it's pretty much self-explanatory. Since we've already started using it, we're just trying to get town affirmation. Next, we have an article for authorization of the Board of Selectmen to use tax increment financing agreements to encourage construction of new commercial office buildings in University Avenue. There have been at least approached by a couple of companies about perhaps constructing office space in University Station. And in order to compete in today's market, every other town is giving it to companies coming in. And so we're looking to keep that option available to the Board of Selectmen. We obviously have to answer to the residents and explain our position if we do grant them. So this article is just to have the town authorize the Select Board to enter into a TIF if needed.
Pre-submitted questions. The answers to the pre-submitted questions?
Yes. Want
me to read it, Mike?
Right now, I think it's only for University Station.
No, it's for you, we're gonna broaden it to be all of University Park.
All of University Park, yes.
We expect that there'll be some opportunities. There's 100 acres that didn't get developed as University Station, 250 acres in University Park. The station was about 140 acres, another 110 surrounding it. A lot of purchases have been made down there. The anticipation is they're making them for investment purposes and may be coming to us with proposals. Nobody's done it yet, but we've heard indication. So we're going to get this this ability granted for a portion of it. We may as well do it for the entire. And commercial development, remember, commercial development needs to be, we need to continue to remain active so we can maintain our split tax rate. And so if you have to go back to town meeting every time you need that, we only have a couple of town meetings unless we call a special. That delay could be a critical piece of the puzzle for somebody looking to locate an office. They usually have a time frame that their lease is running out in this building, they want to move to another building, and everything needs to be done by that specific date, and they're usually cutting it short. Every office that we've ever talked about had a date certain that they had to get to, and we had to show them that we could get there. It's a critical aspect of their decision.
Go ahead, George.
So you may not have this information now, but I think it would be helpful to have an update on the current TIF we authorized. In other words, because there is some risk exposure for the town, and I think we went through a lot of analysis, and there is one we've already authorized, correct? The University
One, we authorized to Romano Container, yeah.
Right, okay. The other question I have is that there is risk to the town, and I know that we put a lien, we have the town can go in and put a lien on property to protect itself. So the only question I have, Michael, are you talking about a specific TIF, or are you looking for a broad authorization to do it?
That was a different program. Okay. I can't remember the exact name, but that was a program.
T squared or T cubed? Yeah.
Something cubed.
Yeah,
I-cubed.
I-cubed. And so in the I-cubed, that was the tax revenue that the state was generating was used to service a bond of infrastructure improvements that were being made. In the event that the taxes that were generated to the state were not sufficient to then do the bond, the developer was put at risk. They were supposed to supplement in advance and continue to update. And the ultimate risk was it could potentially come back to the town if all that fell apart.
And we could lien the property.
We could lien the property.
But my question is, what is are you asking for a broader authorization without specifics? And if you are, what is the financial?
So the authorization here is to enter into a tax increment financing, which is basically a tax exemption over a term, somewhere between 5 and 20 years, usually done on a percentage basis, usually done on a decreasing basis, to run it out to zero. So, for instance, I'm just going to throw a number out there. The first year you give them 50%, and then you'd go down the next year and next year, or you'd stay at 50% for a period and then go down to another percentage, and until you got to zero and they were paying 100% taxes. And the whole objective is to help them in the initial years when they're establishing themselves, and then grow into 100% taxes.
But then what is the select board, if I get my words right here, what is the select board asking for? Is it a broad authorization?
The authorization to
So you're not going to come back with a specific?
We may in fact have some specific. We're currently talking to a couple of boards right now.
And well, my concern would be is parameters. In other words, if somebody has a $1 million tax liability and you're going to relieve them starting at $500,000 for 50%. So there is tax revenue being taken away. Where are the four corners of the document of the authorization, or are you just asking for broad authorization to do it?
It's broad authorization for the Board of Selectmen to negotiate a reasonable TIF agreement that would incentivize an office to be located in the community rather than in a neighboring community or some other location that they've selected. And the other community is oftentimes talking about tax increment financing as well, so.
Do other communities, it might be helpful then, do other communities have this in place, so we're basically
Yes.
want the same thing in our kit bag?
Yes, we basically have talked to 3 or 4 firms in the last few years since University Station came up. And in those instances, they were located in a community with a TIF, and they were looking to relocate in our community. And there was a discussion, and ultimately, in every case, they went somewhere else.
I think it'd be very useful to get some support for this if you know, if there are 4 or 5 competitive towns with Westwood for location, that they have it in our kit bag and we don't. I think that'd be helpful.
One of the outfits that we're looking at, one of the entities that we're talking to now, right, have 3 other communities that they're currently in and negotiating with.
Right. So all you're doing is basically granting some form of tax relief to a potential tenant coming in, motivate them, and it declines over a period of time down to some 0 level.
And the value that they come in with is not impacted. And really, from maintaining a split tax rate, what we're trying to do is get the tax value on a percentage basis to get somewhere in the vicinity of 20%, so we can stabilize this downturn that we've had. Since University Station has come up, we've picked up about 3%. I think we went up from 13 to just around 16% of our total value is commercial. But you know, years ago we had 34% of our tax value was commercial. So we got a long way to go.
So you wouldn't be coming forward with a proposal of saying we want to enter into X number of TIF agreements, or a total number of a value of, like, I don't know, however much, either property value or a tax value, or so you just want the mechanism and then we trust you.
Yes.
So if I could just expand on the answers to both of those questions. The first thing I want to point out is that the tax increment financing only applies to the added value. So you start with the value of the property where it is now, and you only give a reduction on incremental increase to that value. So you're never giving anything away. You're always only discounting the new taxes to come in. So whether you have an existing property that's vacant and a building gets built on it and you apply the discount to the value of the building, or whether you have an existing building and it's renovated or an addition put on, you apply the tax increment financing only to the incremental new tax. So the base tax is never discounted, it always remains there. The other thing I want to point out is that the selectmen have this authority now in the University Station project. It was actually granted with the Westwood Station project in 2007, and in 2013, another town meeting article expanded that to apply not just to Westwood Station, but to University Station, and it was a blanket approval to the selectmen, authorization to approve a TIF on terms that the select board sees as appropriate. However, since 2013, the statute under which the TIFs are granted by towns has changed, and it will be not impossible, but more difficult to work with what we already have than it would be to start fresh. And starting fresh also allows us to expand it not just to University Station, but to all the University Avenue area, so that we're not just looking at the University Station project, but the other 100 acres that have good potential for redevelopment. So it's reauthorizing, expanding the authorization you've already given to a broader land area, and then bringing it up to date so that rather than having to go to the state and amend a plan that was submitted and approved in 2007, we start with a new plan based on the real development that we have before us.
I recall when we put it in place before, it was looking more at like corporate headquarters like Dunkin' Donuts and all that. Has the market changed such that now kind of everybody gets access to it?
It was already allowed for any commercial
but I know, but
including industry. In Westwood, I think our emphasis has always been on office development.
Yeah.
We would prefer to attract offices, and I think that's still the way we're looking at it.
But I thought the goal, the reason why we wanted that that in the tool bag was to try to attract headquarters, corporate
Yes,
headquarters.
And especially new buildings.
Yeah,
So
and so now is it more available to kind of do we find that the market is such that like anybody building an office building is kind of asking for it from other towns and getting it, or?
anyone building a new building certainly is, and in some towns, someone just renovating an existing building is getting it too. Many towns offer it as often for manufacturing as they do for office building. I think we're looking here to specifically apply it to new construction of office buildings. But we're asking for authority to be very broad, because there may be an instance where someone comes
Yeah.
in with an offer that's more beneficial to the town, something that we haven't thought of yet, so. Be a blanket authorization for the select board to consider TIF agreements on their merit.
Was there a question at this end?
Okay, good.
Howard has a question, so we have to connect.
Yep, he's on. Howard? Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, caller.
Go ahead, Howard.
My question is, what evidence is there that TIFs really make a difference? I know you give all this anecdotal evidence, and we're all worried that other towns do this, so we should do it too, but are we sure this isn't just a giveaway that these people would be locating anyway? Is there any real statistical evidence that people locate in towns that have TIFs more than towns that don't, and so forth? Because I don't like seeing given tax revenue away when we maybe don't have to. The developer is always going to say, yeah, I need a TIF to go there, but I'm not sure that's really necessary. I'm saying it also as someone who has built a building in a town where we were offered a TIF and we turned it down. So it certainly didn't make a difference to my company when we needed space.
We have 4 instances in recent years, Howard, where we were in discussions about a TIF, open to the discussion, and the entity did not come here. I mean, there might have been other reasons for that, but we also do know that they've received tax increment financing in those other communities, either to stay or, in one instance, to relocate to a different development than ours. I think it is a factor that gets weighed, and that's the evidence that we have that it does get considered. And the one of them we're speaking with now has already indicated that they're being offered TIFs by the other competing communities that they're in. So it may not be true in all instances, but it has been our experience with the ones we've been dealing with.
Howard, it's actually gotten to the point now that developers are now hiring consultants to negotiate TIFs. That's how the industry has become, is that they're hiring professional negotiators in each town and weighing their options to decide where the best location is for them based on the TIFs.
I understand, but in a lot of ways, it's like the sports stadiums that people get tax breaks for, and then the towns end up paying when they should. I wonder if this is the same kind of deal. And we'll see as we go through the process what other people have to say.
Excuse me.
Howard, what did you say about research you were going to do for the next meeting?
I said I'll take a look and see if there's any real research on how effective TIFs are believed to be. I think I've seen some articles saying that they're really not that effective and that we'd all be better off if there weren't any TIFs.
Let me just build up.
Thank you.
I'm just going to build on what Howard's saying. You know, the land that we have in Westwood, I guess has a value. And, you know, with proximity to the highway, Westwood Station with the T and commuter rail, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't appear as though we are benefiting by offering a TIF to a community that doesn't have those resources in a way that is trying to attract them. I would think that would be some value that could, and I guess that's the point you're trying to make, Howard, or I took from what you asked. What is the value of our land and property compared to another town that doesn't have the services we have, et cetera, et cetera? And, you know, the town's going to, I mean, the business was going to come here anyway because of how convenient it is to the highway and because of the T, et cetera. And we're just competing against ourselves. Is that a possibility?
Well, listen, it's always a possibility. I mean, no one knows the ulterior motive. The bottom line is that 5 years later, we still don't have any office development down there. So apparently we're not doing something right, or we're not competing with the other markets. We had a chance to steal a couple that Waltham stole, so obviously the incentive to go to Waltham, which was right off 95, was enough for them. So I don't think we're, until they fix the interchange, I don't think we're really much more unique than some of the other towns right on 95.
Actually, if you look in the vicinity of Route 9 and above, there's all kinds of office development, and those are the prime locations. This end of 95, by comparison, is very much lacking in
TripAdvisor, all the way up from Needham, you can see that incentive, something happened in those towns that they got the incentive.
Well, those are better locations. They maybe can get away without a TIF to attract them. Yeah.
High visibility from the highway, et cetera, et cetera. So,
and access to the Mass Pike and all the rest, I think.
They're an off-ramp.
And 4 lanes versus 3 lanes and interchanges at work and things like that.
My thought is, everything is relative, what makes sense, and again, to Howard's, the point he made is we just got to safeguard ourselves from not giving away something that potentially we wouldn't have to, that's all.
So I think we would rely on the select board to make those comparisons, to sit down with the companies that are looking to come here, to compare the places they're looking in Westwood with somewhere else, and to determine what are the factors that rise to the level of making a decision. And I think that's within their responsibility to do that, and I know with the businesses we're speaking to now, that is going on.
And I won't speak for the other two, Mike, but I also think, we get what we think is a good deal, and that's it. That's it. Take it or leave it. This is where we're not, giving it away to you. But that's the art of negotiation. Is they're going to start high, we're going to start low, and can you get to a middle ground?
Well, I appreciate the clarification of the point that we've already established what the base tax is, and we never deviate from that. So that's significant of itself right there. So it's the future. And
the purpose is to have a discount to get the new building built or the old building renovated, so that when that discount period ends, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years, once that ends, you're getting full value. So all the incremental increase is over and above what you would get without it. And we've found that office buildings are not interested in coming here without a TIF so far. So there may be instances where we were able to attract an office without a TIF, but there are other instances where we know a TIF is needed.
Yeah, I do. The way you guys describe this warrant article isn't about, I don't think it's about should we do a TIF or not do a TIF. That's not what this is about, I think. It's really, what you're really saying is you want discretion to do it at the select board level without this process, without FinCom and town meeting, because you think this process slows things down and you may need to move more quickly. And that's really what you're asking. So you're asking for discretion. So authorization, discretion, however you want to say it. So can you just walk us through what the select board's process for this is? Is it open? Is it public? How many meetings do you have? Is it behind closed doors negotiations? Do you get to, does the ultimate agreement then come in front of the town or not? What's your process so we can understand what we're giving up by bypassing this process?
The bottom line is eventually we would have to vote on it in open session. That's the bottom line. So it could be a combination of all of those things, but the bottom line is when the vote comes, it has to be in public in front of everyone.
Can I just make one more point clear? The board has the authorization now in University Station. They don't have the authorization outside of University Station. So it's an expansion of the authorization they already have. And the authorization they have now is based on an old plan which requires us to go before the state to get the state approval for amendments to that. If we get a new authorization, it solves that problem by putting a new TIF plan in front of you that allows the TIF to be approved for that specific area instead of for an area that really never existed. So it's more alleviating red tape, making sure that we don't have to jump through hoops to approve a process that's already in existence, but the authority, the selectmen do have the authority. They received it in 2007, it was reconfirmed in 2013. They could act under that authority, but we'd be able to act more quickly and more appropriately with new authority.
And you're exactly right, Michael. If you're having a discussion with somebody, they got a date certain, they want to make a decision by this date, but there's a town meeting that's 2 months away.
Yeah.
and you have to say, trust me, we'll get the approval. That not always convincing, and they'll probably go with the sure thing rather than the possible thing.
And I think Mike adds to that by saying that in the end, your deliberation or discussion happens in the public. So there is at least a moment where the public is advised of some tax break we're giving people.
Right.
And has a chance presumably to speak up about it.
Right.
Can I just follow up on that? The question was, Mike said, ultimately we'll vote on it. This Mike's question was, will the deliberations be open? Will the deliberations be open or just the final vote?
Well, usually the deliberations do not take, do not involve more than one board member. So the, to give you an example, right now, if there's anything going on, as the chair, I would sit in on that, okay? I would try to negotiate, but then finally when it comes up, it has to be made public, and the other two then have to vote on it for the first time they're hearing it.
So it'd be presented to the full board?
Correct.
There wouldn't be any executive sessions
No.
or anything?
No.
And is the region you're talking about is the area beyond the University Station development up to?
It's all of the current industrial district that's along University Avenue. So it's land on University Avenue, Dartmouth Street, Harvard Street, Yale Street, and Station Drive.
So it doesn't go up to Route 1? Or?
It does not, no. We're trying to concentrate the area of office development along University Avenue. So there are other commercial areas in town that have office development. Southwest Park is fairly well developed already. Glacier Drive is fairly well developed. So we'd really like to concentrate on University Avenue, which has the oldest warehouse buildings that are valued lower than some other properties, and we'd like to do what we can to get those values up. That will help us with our split tax rate.
Any other questions before we move on? Great. So we'll go on to the electricity aggregation. Thanks, Mark.
So this is an article intended to authorize the town and the select board to select a company to do aggregate electricity for its residents and businesses, which will encourage people to buy electricity from that is produced from renewable energy. So it sounds like a lot, but it really is very simple. That you opt in, you're not forced in. It allows people to spend, sometimes in cases, more money than they would have spent for regular, but it's all because it's used with renewable energy resources. I had a company that, personally, that, not going through the community electrical aggregate, that did have a solar component to it that I stayed with for a long time, but eventually their rates went much higher than even Eversource. So companies do have incentive, but for me to talk about it would be foolish when Tom can talk circles around me. So I'll let Tom answer any questions you might have about it, but just to say it's an opt-in, and we would probably hook up at some point, if we decide to do it, with other communities to get the best price we possibly can for our town.
You have to correct. It's actually an opt-out, we found out later. So there was one time when we presented it to you as an opt-in, it's an opt-out.
Okay.
It's not that, everybody is in initially, and then they opt out. And before the contract is signed, there's usually if you just stay with it, you're going to save something. Otherwise, the contract never gets approved. And if it doesn't get approved, nothing happens. So you've got to save something. And the lowest level will guarantee approximately another 5% or so on top of the already existing alternative energy component that should be in the Eversource supply.
Yeah.
So right now there's a transmission component and there's a supplyment of the electricity. What does this affect? Are you talking about?
The supply.
Supply. So now, if Eversource happens to be, Eversource is my supplier right now, what are you saying? Is Eversource have to compete for this, or is this an alternative? Then what happens to me as a consumer?
If you sign into it, you will get a bill from Eversource just like you normally do, which if you do nothing, should be slightly lower. If you decide that, no, I want to have more solar on my you may then pay a penny more than you do now per kilowatt hour. And if you want to go to 50%, like in some communities in Brookline, you might pay 5 cents an extra or something like that. But it's strictly up to you.
So when Mike was, you were having sort of a quiet conversation. Do I opt in or opt out at this?
You opt out.
I
If you do nothing, you'll end up getting the benefit of you should get a slightly lower rate on your electric.
That means I'm going with the new provider you guys.
That's right.
Selected. Okay. Now, a power outage happens. If I'm in this new program, who do I call?
Eversource. Everything is Eversource.
Okay.
Everything continues to go through Eversource. There's no change.
So this is, I'm sorry, are you done?
Yeah.
So this is like you keep getting these calls from these alternate energy suppliers. So, so I do the thing for church, and we use Viridian. So we would be getting rid of Viridian, and it would be whoever the town picks. So instead of it being just a one-on-one thing, and they try to sell it to everybody, it's just basically you're bundling it, and it's.
Yeah,
like
if you are
getting
now
against.
tied up with another supplier, you will have to see the end of whatever contractual arrangement you have
Okay.
before you can then you would opt in. You're not in initially.
Okay.
If you have another supplier, you are in initially if you have Eversource as your supplier. And then you opt out if you don't want to, and you just stay with the normal Eversource,
Okay.
excuse me, rate.
So you could still do the individual if you wanted to, if you never did get out of that contract and you never opted in.
Right.
You could still okay. So it's basically, you're buying in bulk.
Yes.
Okay.
So
what evidence do you have that's actually gonna save you money?
Other communities that are in,
Okay, so you've talked to other communities?
yes, there's several other communities that are involved. I can't at the top of my head tell you, but there's about 8 or 9 on the list that have done it already.
In the area
Yeah,
around
Lexington,
Westwood?
for example, I know.
Dedham.
Dedham.
Somerville, Sudbury, Winchester, Brookline.
Yeah, based on the annual reports that these communities have filed, it looks like Dedham, communities that have a larger commercial base have more leverage to negotiate a lower rate for their residential customers. But communities such as Westwood that don't have as large a commercial base, the rate that I'm seeing in their reports to the state indicate a much higher rate residentially than I'm paying right now.
You're saying they're paying a higher residential rate?
That's what, for example, Medway's report.
You're paying less right at the moment in Westwood because we signed a year or so ago a long-term contract for supply with Constellation. That gives us approximately 9 cents per kilowatt hour for delivery. And the normal cost right now, if you're not in Westwood, you're paying 11, 12. So we have a few cents better.
I get my electricity from Eversource.
You do. But we as a town negotiated the supplier. Eversource does not have any of its own supply.
So we're already aggregating.
We're already aggregated under that contract, right? And if we have to get another contract that's better, it would shift over into the other one.
So if we're already aggregated, how come the town never voted on it?
I don't know that it even had to be voted on.
The statute says the
No,
town
but
must
every
approve.
year, as a normal process, you negotiate with the supplier. And that has been going on as long as I've been involved.
The town negotiates, yeah.
Right.
But individual residents don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. That does not affect the residents. I don't know what, I don't know.
It's only a municipal.
I'm thinking of the
Municipal
town.
supply, we already go through an aggregation through
Right.
Constellation, where we get all of our,
Understand
we get
that.
all of our energy from.
What I'm trying to say is that I don't think it's gonna save the residents any money because Westwood doesn't have the leverage it takes to negotiate a lower rate for its residential customers.
But if it doesn't save us money, we don't go. In other words, we go out for the bidding on the contract. If that contract comes back and said it's gonna cost the same or more, we have the option of not doing it.
Have you talked to any of the suppliers to see what rate you could get?
Well, you won't know until the time. It all will depend very much on, if you have 20 big solar projects going and people are looking for you to buy in, then you're most likely gonna get a favorable rate. If you have nothing going on and all the alternative energy is gone, or prices have gone up or changed, or whatever the situation might be, it'll be much more difficult to get anything. So a process question. The town approves this warrant article. Do you need to go back to the town to get permission to implement that contract? No, I think that
That's what you're getting. That's what the article's getting.
That's what the article's for. So, the town approves this article, you're going to propose something, get state approval for something, contract with a supplier, and implement that contract, all without further town input. That's correct.
Well, I don't think it's without further town input, so
Well, like
I think
selectmen.
there's gonna be a process, it'll be in front of the selectmen, there'll be discussions, and if there's an indication that this is not a favorable thing to the community, we won't go forward with it. So I don't think that way of looking at it is correct.
I guess what I'm suggesting is this is premature. I don't know whether or not this is actually going to be beneficial to the residents of Westwood, because there's no data in front of me. No, but if it isn't, it won't be done. I'm sorry? If it isn't beneficial, we won't go forward. You can understand why some residents
Why would
wouldn't
the
trust that
selectmen
statement.
vote for a contract that's detrimental to the residents? It doesn't make any sense.
But part of the reason, the summary states that it's encouraging the supply of electricity produced by renewable energy.
That's
So
correct.
that's the goal, rather than provides cheaper electricity.
The goal is to encourage the development of alternative energy.
So traditionally, that ends up being a little more expensive, so.
It does unless you do it through this aggregation
Yeah.
process, and in most cases, it may be as little as a half or a cent or so, but there is some benefit if you just take the base rate, which is an incremental 5% on the renewable portion. You can then opt in for higher numbers and pay more. But the base rate has to be less than the existing base rate that you're paying with Eversource. Otherwise, generally speaking, you won't go forward.
Isn't the base 2080?
Pardon?
Isn't the base 2080, 20 renewable,
I think it's now 14, but it goes
Will
up.
residents be able to flip back and forth, like when you come up with a contract each time? I assume it's a one-year contract or something?
2 years.
2 year, so residents will be informed and can.
They can
will have
opt out at any
information.
time with no penalty.
Oh, no penalty, okay, good.
And they can opt in with no penalty if they want to get out, if they get out of the other one as well.
And we don't administer it, it's the contract.
You know, I'm sorry?
We don't, the town does not administer it for the, it's the, whoever we contract with.
Oh, the bidding is called, a company called Good Energy, and they're endorsed by the MMA, the Mass Municipal Association.
So we have issues about wanting to get in or out, we would talk to them and still go to Eversource on the power issues, okay.
Any other questions? Did we get the questions in our, sorry?
So, Julie?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So, Tom and Mike, would you consider amending this so that at the end of it, it said, which will encourage the supply of electricity produced by renewable energy at a rate that is equal to or less than that which is otherwise available to residents?
On the warrant article?
Yeah, just in other words, so that to Barb's point, if this says renewable, we can all get solar, but we go up 25 cents a watt. This allows you to do that, but if you constrain yourself to equal or lower pricing, then.
For the base rate, yeah.
Then you have, then I imagine most people would be, it doesn't cost us and we're gonna get renewable energy, then it gets supported.
I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't.
Something for you guys
As
to do.
long as you understand that if you go up on, there's a base
Yeah.
percentage.
Yes.
We're just
That's
talking
right.
about, it.
I think at that
it
given
was-
point in time, if it's
Yeah.
equal to or less than.
No, what they're saying is the base rate is, if you want to enter for the base rate, you should save something. If
Yeah.
you decided, in your case, you would rather have 50%,
Yeah,
that means you're going to pay more.
yes.
But that's your decision.
So, yeah, you're thinking about having clean energy, and so you want to do 50%. And you're willing to pay more to get there, because it's providing a marketplace for those that are developing that energy.
There is a 25%, and one, I can't think of the community. Some of the communities, it was surprising the percent of people who have opted to pay more, because you're talking not a lot of money.
And the base rate already has higher percentage
It does,
of
it
renewable
has to be a
energy
5%
than-
increment, yeah.
Well, this article could be adjust it to either say what I just said, or to say you're gonna negotiate an aggregate electricity option.
Yeah, I think.
So if you add that word in, that's different. So I think to Chris's point, I think the question is, might we be stuck with higher, there may be some people who hate solar electricity. And those folks, they may not want to pay more for it. So,
Yeah.
if it was cleaned up in one of those two ways or both of those two ways, I think you'd solve some of these problems.
I don't think that's a problem.
I don't think so.
Just something to think about in the draft.
Yeah.
It's all in the drafting.
Indeed.
Any other questions? We okay with Howard? Okay,
We should make that change. We should make the change.
new article, we have one last new article,
Yes.
Yes.
sale of town-owned property.
Small piece of land, very small, between a public way and a non-conforming occupied residential lot. And if I'm not mistaken, they approached the town and said, it's not taken care of, we'd like to take care of it, we'd like to purchase it from the town. And without giving away too much, we don't think it's worth keeping. We might as well put it on the tax rolls.
Yeah, it's an isolated piece that got cut off by the creation of a street through a town-owned property. So there's a sliver of land on the other side of the street that really was part of the whole town property at one time, but now is no longer. That is close to this undersized lot, and the individual wants to maintain it better than we're doing.
Do you have an estimate on what the property
Yeah,
is
it'd
worth?
be worth about somewhere in the vicinity of $3,000.
What is that, Mike, again? I'm sorry.
3,000.
3,000.
3,000.
And no plans to build on it?
No.
No, it's not, well, it literally is sliver.
That's how small it is.
Yeah.
Where is it located? How big is it?
Located near,
Is that part of the negotiation?
You'll tell us at some point.
I'll tell you
Yeah.
at some point.
Just
yeah,
coming
yeah,
attractions, we'll give you more
It's-
details.
You'd have to kill us if you told us. So.
We're just holding it. We haven't finished discussions with the individual yet, so I'll keep that until we finish that.
Any questions?
And it would, just one final note on that, when we usually do these things, we start at a bid price, that's the value that we're looking to recover, that we think it's worth, that we've had it appraised for, and we have to go out to auction. And really, the property owner that's just adjacent is the one most inclined to buy it, so.
Okay. Thank you all, that was great. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Tom, for hanging out. So the only other thing I think we want to do before we close is, we talked about the subcommittees, who would own the articles. Do we want to make the assignments? People feel you have enough information about the articles? I think the budget articles we'll see in the next meeting. Right. You want to go through those? Or do you want to do them offline? Jim, we didn't get a chance.
Let me get a chance to check with Lauren and Chris.
Okay.
I'll
Do
send
that.
Jay an email.
Okay. I think that's most of them, to tell you the truth. Well done.
Yeah.
Tom's got select. George, are you still okay with the authorization? Chris and Barb, the electricity aggregation. Peg was long range, either Mike or Barb.
I can do that.
OPEB we had, Jane, okay. Ellen, the electronic voting. All right, and the rest are, Jim, you're,
Yeah, Lauren and Chris, if you can hang out after.
okay. That's just easy.
Did Michael Harris say he was gonna take?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Mike will take.
Yeah, I can do the cable one.
Okay, great. Cable, the funding,
Peg funding.
PEG funding,
Yeah,
there it
yeah.
is. Okay, great. Do we have minutes or anything to approve? No. Do we have to do anything special, roll call?
Nope, we do
Sign
not.
off?
Nope, we just,
Okay.
somebody just needs
Do
to
we have make a
call.
motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Anyone second? All in favor?
Aye.
We need Howard? No? Great. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, yeah.